Good morning, everyone. Stop and think session for deconstruction, post-structuralism and deconstruction. Let me just uh, talk about this for as a revision. A key text in post-structuralism is Derrida's book of grammatology. It's one of the important texts in post-structuralism and deconstruction. And how his own sentence, "There is nothing outside the text," is taken in and out of the context of deconstruction. We saw that how it is taken in and out of the context of deconstruction. Yeah, so there is nothing outside the text. That kind of a sentence or a statement, how it is taken in and out of the context of deconstruction, we saw. There is a text. If you take it in the sense of the structuralist viewpoint, you can take the language for granted so that you don't have to see anything outside the text. There is nothing outside. What you get at surface level itself is the end product. That's what you mean there. But if it is the exact meaning that is meant by that is taken, that is the statement, if you take in the sense as given by any post-structuralist, especially Derrida, is there is nothing outside the text means you don't have to go in search of any external elements. You don't have to bring any external characters for bringing an entirely new meaning of a text. Meaning for a text or any entirely different interpretation for a text. We know how we did a lot of we explained it with a lot of examples, textual examples, film we used it to describe. We didn't change any of the situations or characters, their life, anything. But we get an entirely different picture of certain events, and that is an entirely different reading as well. And out of the context to justify a kind of extreme textualism, out of the context of post-structuralism to justify a kind of extreme textualism. That is, the reality is linguistic so that there can be no meaningful talk of a real world which exists without question outside language. In that sense, it is only language. That is, you can stick on to language. You can rely language. It's very reliable. That is the way if you take that same sentence out of the context of deconstruction. But what about one actually put forward by Derrida is going to be something entirely different. That is, method of interpreting this is nature of all interpretation Derrida talks about. The tendency of any reader to cling on to the situation, background, the author's background, author's moral and mental and social, political conditions. We don't have to be like that any longer. That's what Derrida says, or he reminds, or any post-structuralist or deconstructive critique reminds us to do. Okay, so this is about the concept of the supplement. He debates the concept of the supplement, a word in which French can also mean replacement. You are replacing something. The new meaning, the already existing. That is, you are not finding out something, but you are actually realizing something which is already there. It's a kind of replacement in the sense that language replaces or stands in for reality. It stands in for reality. Language replaces or stands in, so that next time another person can stand in. So in the same way, another reading, another interpretation can stand in there. It's not a fixed position. It's not a fixed interpretation. It's not a fixed reading. So this is the way, that is what exactly is the nature of the standing in. He talks about the standing in. The person writing is inscribed in a determined textual system. We know how the person writing is inscribed in a determined textual system. We all inherit language as a ready-made system with its own history, philosophy and so on already built in. Is it like that? Is it so? Yeah, maybe, but we have to challenge such a history because history also is textual. Till date we felt that history is history, there is no change at all. But just think about a historical text. That also is written by a person. When Britishers write about the colonial rule in India, okay, that is a historical text. The way they ruled here, the way they treated us, that we can take as a historical text. But just think about the way it is created, it's written. It is on the part of the, it is with the viewpoint of a colonial master. We will not get our voice to reclaim our past, or to justify our points, or to criticize their cruelties. So that history also is biased. We can have an entirely different picture of the history. They tell that Indians were barbarous. They were good for nothing fellows. We had to teach them a proper language. But what we had to tell, we have to tell about their rule, their nasty behavior, their cruelties. That also is part of our history. So the same way language also, it's a ready-made system and there is no change possible. This is the way we take always and already built in. But in this sense, one might argue that we don't express ourselves in words, merely some aspect of language. I have already explained this point. This is just about a revisionary looking into that, say, stop and think session as we stopped in the middle. So don't express ourselves in words, merely some aspects of a language. See, a word having two meanings. That's why I gave you the example of drop out. Drop out. The normal surface of the very common meaning is a person who drops a course, discontinues a course. Okay. But it can be read in an entirely different way with a very positive meaning sense. That is, a dropout is a person who thinks and acts differently. That's very positive a sense. That person can bring wonder. Other one is a failure, but the same word can give you a meaning which talks about a person who can be very different and can bring wonders because of the difference in thought, difference in approach towards problems. You see, so that a person who takes the first meaning, only the first meaning of the term, is expressing merely one aspect of the language or some aspects of the language. Many other aspects are existing, but we have to find it out by effort. We have to take effort. Okay, taking the meaning that you see for the first time in the dictionary, or the first, see, meanings are given in the order. First possible meaning, second possible meaning, you just check out an authentic dictionary. In that, if you become satisfied with what is already given in that at the top of the list, then you are never going to be a deconstructive critic, because you are satisfied with what is common and what is already there, which is already available to everyone. But if you become different, you become a deconstructive critic only at the point that you are ready to look at the second possible meaning. Drop out. You are not satisfied with the first meaning. You check out the second meaning when you see as and when you see there. It doesn't mean that every word in the dictionary may have a lot of meanings or more than two or three meanings. Some words are with one meaning, but sometimes the etymologies may say you something different. Okay, so this is the way we just express merely some aspect of language. The writer writes in a language and in a logic whose proper systems, laws and like his discourse by definition cannot dominate absolutely. Okay, so we write, we think in our own ways, according to our own systems and laws and understanding. The discourse by definition cannot dominate absolutely. And see, we cannot have control over our meaning. I write a text, I tell something, and I cannot be obstinate. I cannot insist upon you that you have to read it the way I meant or I think. No, that's impossible. He uses them by only letting himself, after a fashion and up to a point, be governed by the system. Another problem is a person who is born and brought up in a system, who knows a language, who comes to familiarize with a language by mingling, by communicating with others. So that always, most often, majority of the meanings he or she acquires shall be something which is very common and which is already given by the established system. The person becomes very different person, expresses himself or herself to be different at a point where he or she is ready to think differently, to check out something new. Okay, so this is just about after a fashion you are. After that, you may find out something different and you are capable of reading something or reading in an entirely different manner as well. And the reading must always aim at a certain relationship, unperceived by the writer, between what he commands and what he does not command. This is the problem that always exists in the mind of a reader. What is perceived by the writer, what he might have thought or she might have thought while creating such a character. And I see we feel like a commitment which is not necessary, or to read in the way which is not meant by him or her. So that's very problematic. But if you think in terms of such a commitment, you will never come up with a deconstructive reading, a post-structuralist reading, because it's unperceived by the writer. Finding out that unperceived element in the text between what he commands and what he does not command. That's the part where I mentioned about the open-ended books or open-ended parts, which are almost like a building which is with with every side you have multiple windows, open for discussion, open for interpretations. But certain texts we feel like very closed. Even in those cases, we can find something new. Loopholes may be there because language is such a fluid system. Not as structuralist critics say, language is closed, only one thing or the other thing is existing. You don't have to think differently. No, that is something very challengeable, also debatable a topic. So, of the patterns of the language that he uses, what he does not command, what he commands, and what he does not command. We are trying to use that. We are trying to find out such elements and bring our own readings and interpretations. Okay, this relationship is not a certain quantitative distribution of shadow and light, of weakness or of force, but a signifying structure that critical reading should produce. So this is what we need in a critical reading. It's not about a play at surface level. It's not going to be a quantitative distribution of shadow and light. Some passages may be very surface level, you don't have to check out more, but the next passage may be capable of bringing out an entirely different picture for the whole story. Just think about this same term dropout, and I mentioned the autobiographical book of that person, the master brain behind Apple, the technology of Apple. Oh yes, see, it's operating system Apple that is connected with that person, and how his being a dropout, that term becomes entirely, the second term becomes really matching for his personality and life. A person who thinks and acts differently, not just a mere school dropout. If he mentions about himself as a dropout, if you take the first meaning only, the text gives a picture of him as a person who is unable to study, incapable of continuing his education. But if you take the second meaning, it becomes more suitable, which is not very readily available because that's not very common a meaning existing for the word. We are not familiar unless and until I asked you the meaning that day in the class, and almost some of you gave me the meaning. As we all know, a person who doesn't continue education or stops education, that's all. That's what we mean, or we know. And we have another meanings as well. And reading and interpretation then are not just reproducing what the writer thought and expressed in the text. Not just reproducing what the writer thought and expressed in the text. That's not our matter of concern. That should not be our matter of concern. Reading or interpretation. It should not be just reproducing what the writer thought or expressed. That's what we mean do when you say the story plot of a novel or plot of a film. Sometimes you explain the plot or the brief sketch for the movie that you watched for your friends. Such and such events here and there, from here and there, and sometimes you may talk about, yeah, that character is very good and the other character is very villainous. Sometimes in in that very positive or very heroistic character, there may be a lot of loopholes. Okay, and in the villainous character, there may be something justifiable, but we will not get it at a surface level viewpoint or interpretation. So that's why the writer thought and expressed in the text. That's not just about reproducing these elements. Interpretation doesn't mean that. This inadequate notion of interpretation, Derrida calls it doubling commentary. This is an inadequate notion of this interpretation. Okay, and since it tries to reconstruct a pre-existing non-textual reality, it tries to reconstruct a pre-existing non-textual reality. Why it is pre-existing? Yeah, dropout second meaning is pre-existing. It's not that after a time period I am finding it out for you or you are finding it for me. It's it's not you are creating a new meaning. No, it's about the already, but you didn't see. I didn't see. We didn't know. But we know now because we are willing to check out for the differences. So this is a pre-existing, non-textual reality. Sometimes it may be out of the text. It may not be available at the surface level of the text. So what the writer did not thought or lay alongside the text. So there's every time it's possible that you can lay something alongside the text. The writer can do that. So that again the text becomes open for interpretation. But none of them may not see. In the past, we cannot expect the writers to admit that. Most of us prefer a comfortable reading. That's why I mentioned about the teacher giving you a reading for a poem and you by heart it, you go and omit it in the examination paper. You are safe and secure so that you can secure marks. And a student who has an entirely different reading for the same text may be worried about the way it will be taken or rejected. If the person writes it during the examination, it's again taking risk. But that reading may be more valuable sometimes. Possibilities there. Yeah, instead, critical reading must produce the text since there is nothing behind it for us to reconstruct. Very important point. I promised you to explain it on with the help of certain metaphors. The construction, home construction or building construction, we can talk about this construction, reconstruction, deconstruction. These words, how we can take or get a better grasping using the metaphor of certain buildings. Okay, we will see that. Thus, the reading has to be deconstructive rather than reconstructive in this sense. This is the point where Derrida makes the remark, which he later calls the axial proposition of the essay, the major proposition of the essay. That is, there is nothing outside the text. You have to deconstruct it. I will tell about the possible ways we can construct, deconstruct, reconstruct a building. Okay, then we will see the significance of this. I will tell you. That is, on a land, a bare land, I am constructing a new home. an entirely no other building, nothing of the old building, nothing. I buy a very bare land and I begin constructing a building, new home there. That is equal to a writer writing a text. Let us take that in that sense. Okay, first possibility. Another possibility is there, that is, you have already a building in on a land, you demolish the entire building. We have come across the demolition process very recently in Kerala, Sister Kerala, with those three or four flats, Alpha Sorin, Jane Coral Co, Golden Kyle, and all those getting demolished, and we watched that with all the see that kind of live broadcasting was there, and we saw how it got demolished. Nothing of its anything, nothing remained afterwards. See, that is destruction. It's not there is nothing construction involved in it. Okay, but we have to talk about another two terms: reconstruction and deconstruction. Reconstruction and deconstruction, very important. I will talk about the way my home, the home I at present occupy. It was a very old home. It was a very old home with the walls, all those, a very old-fashioned home. But at a point, we started reconstructing it. Reconstructing in the sense we didn't demolish the building. I'm talking about my experience. I witnessed this so that I can get you this example of how reconstruction and how we can take this metaphor for a reconstructive reading. Okay? Yeah. So, at a point, we started reconstructing it in the sense we didn't demolish the building, kept a lot of walls and many other areas as the same, but we in the sense that in a reconstruction, in the sense that we kept a lot of parts, but if you look at the house now, the building now, it doesn't have anything to do with the old home. If I show you the picture of the old building and the new building, it doesn't have much anything in common. But we know for sure that many old elements are still there. Even now I can touch some of the walls and say that, yeah, this was the room we used as office room in the past, but now it is my dining hall. Or this is a room which we extended. It was not there when it was my old building. This is reconstruction. At a very surface level reading, you can talk about this reconstruction because there is no entire change for the building. It's about reconstruction. Deconstruction. Reconstruction in the sense we prefer this deconstruction itself. It's not deconstruction, meaning deconstruction. The old elements are there. Reconstruction is very simple actually. Reconstruction, please don't be confused. Reconstruction is very simple. It's just about your changing the torn out parts. If some tile or something is broken or somewhere, you just reconstruct it by changing that. That's a reconstruction. It's not preferable at all. A deconstructive critic never prefers this reconstruction. You are not changing any the form of the building or anything. I forgot to mention that. The deconstruction is what I mean by the building, the change in the home that we made here. using a lot of old elements. Old walls are there, old rooms are there. Those are not completely demolished. But if you look from outside, nothing of the old one remains. This is what is the process of deconstruction as well. When you read a text without changing the characters, without changing anything inside that, any incidents or anything inside that, that is going to be a deconstructed building. It will look like my new home, which has a lot of elements of the old building in it, but in a hidden manner only. At the outside, from the outside, it is something entirely different. The way we have an entirely different reading of a text. Okay, so reconstruction is very simple. It's just about you are changing just some of the broken tiles or some of the broken parts. You just pave some tile on the floor. Maybe it's okay, but that's not something entirely new. But this is something, it is going to change the whole picture of the building, whole view for the building. It's going to change. Okay, so that has reconstruction is definitely not preferred, but deconstruction. You can use the old elements, but without making anything. You can use the old elements, but because without keeping the old ones visible as it is. Okay, so that is the main thing. And instead of critical reading, we must produce the text. There is nothing behind it for us to reconstruct. Actually, reconstruction is not the major thing, but deconstruction. So the reading has to be deconstructive rather than reconstructive. Reconstruction actually doesn't bring something new. It's just about shifting from here and talking about characters from plot if you want. If you make the comments, make a reading reconstruction. If you take it at the reading of a textual interpretation, it is going to be a casual commentary, but something more than that maybe. But it's not going to bring anything surprising in the mode of your analysis. Okay, so nothing outside the text. That's why he says there is nothing outside the text. How old are you movie? The climax scene, the characters, their nature, nothing you have to change for that entirely different reading. There is nothing outside the text for you to deconstruct. You have all the elements in the text itself to deconstruct it. The old elements, as the way we used the old walls or the old stones, old floor, even the basement. We didn't change the basement. We didn't change the basement. Same basement we used. For extended rooms, we had to take another basement. We had to dig, but other than that, it's the same. The basement is the same. The story is the same. The plot is the same. The climax is the same. You don't change it. But the reading of that you change. And it's a deconstruction. Reading cannot legitimately transgress the text out towards something other than it. That's the main important thing. Otherwise, there is every chance that we mistake that. Reading cannot legitimately transgress the text towards something other than it. That is not possible. Something other than that means you have to change the characters and all. No. That's not the possibility. So that is we may have the tendency to mistake that. Okay, teacher says that any reading can be accepted. So that I will write down as it comes to my mind during examination time. The examination hall, some ideas will occur to me and I will write in the way I prefer. Which if you write down such an answer which doesn't have anything to do with the text in a legitimate manner, you are not going to be given any marks. So this is not going to be an unlicensed way of interpreting a text. You have to keep something, some point of analysis. This is about the decentering process. There is no one single center. You can have more than one centers. My center of reading may be different from that of your center of reading. That's all. See, it cannot legitimately transgress the text towards something other than it, or toward a signified outside the text whose content could have taken place outside of language. That is to say, in the sense that we give here to that word outside of writing in general. That is not the possibility. We talk about textual republicanism. We will talk about textual republicanism. It's not just a freedom which doesn't hold any control. It's going to be textual republicanism. With the death of the order author, we told about that. In a nation which is republic, it has its own rules and regulations. But it's unlike a despotic rule. That's all is the difference. But we have a control of our own. So same thing is preferable when you interpret and approach a text. You cannot say something without having any control over the thought or logic or anything. That's going to be very logical, but you have the freedom if you can substantiate your argument point. That is why the methodological considerations that we risk applying here to an example are closely dependent on general propositions that we have elaborated above as regards the absence of the referent or the transcendental signified. Very important and a concept. Transcendental signified. There is nothing outside the text. I will talk about transcendental signified, which is very important. Transcendental signified. What is that concept? The concept of transcendental signified. We always expect something to hold power, to be the ultimate. More than that, there is nothing questionable about it. If you talk about a nation, it is going to be the president. If you talk about the religion, it is going to be the godly figure, godly symbol. Different religions hold different godly symbols, figures, or the concepts, but still the concept of God is one of the transcendental signifieds. If you talk about the ruling sector or the ruling mode of a nation or nations, it's going to be the topmost political figure. In the case of nation, it is going to be president, maybe. In the role in the nation, in countries where royal rule, kingdom. So then king is the maybe the transcendental signified. That is a kind of authority, an agency which is unquestionable. The power and the concept is unquestionable. That kind of an unquestionable agencies are challenged here with this deconstruction process. Definitely in colonial rule, colonial masters are supposed to be the transcendental signifieds. You get the idea? So the transcendental signified is going to be till date that was or that remained an unchallenging, unquestionable force which we all had to or had the tendency to take for granted. No longer. Okay, so the transcendental signified, and we will come across more of it when we deal with the postmodernism, where also it talks about the incredulity towards meta-narratives, grand narratives. Only at that point we will. This is grand narrative, meta-narrative, high. We are at the top and we are worried about challenging the Western concept of beauty, the Western concept of culture. All these had been at the top and the center. How many of us did want to challenge? Even when you talk about nationalism, even when you talk about mother tongue, how many of us are willing to be in Malayalam medium schools or to talk about Tamil people, Tamil medium schools? Because you are worried about the setback or the way if we will be unsuccessful, we will not be very successful because if we don't know English, because it has its own global validation. That's one thing. But even then, transcendental, that's why these transcendental signifieds do hold the validation even now. We talk about deconstruction, we start doing deconstruction, but still we are not that confident. We still hold the tendency to stick on to such agencies. These are the power structures. Actually, these are the power structures, and we are contributing to that. Even when we know that a lot of loopholes are there, white is not just the standard of beauty. English is not just the elegant language. If you don't know English, it's not going to take any make any problem in okay. Obviously, it's good that you know, but that doesn't mean that if you don't know English, so it's going to your life is going to end there. No, it's a tool for communication. It's one of the tools for communication. It's good because it's global language, so that majority of the people know it. So communication becomes very smooth. That's all. But we always think in terms of the transcendental signified nature of the Western imperialism, their culture, their language. There is no chance that we become successful if we do not know the language. This is what we take. We take all the while and we give too much of importance to their style, their lifestyle, their culture, their products, their language, their food culture. Everywhere we try to imitate because of this already existing or taken for granted agencies, the power structures. And that's what they are trying to challenge. I told you in the very beginning itself, most of the proponents of post-structuralism and deconstruction were from very poor background of the society. They didn't want to accept the elitism of Western imperialism. They knew if we permit this, if we add food and fodder to this will never last. This will never stop continuing. You may have a declaration of independence of different nations, different areas, different sectors, but still this will go on, and we see the pathetic condition how it's going on. We know even now still racism, racial issues, discrimination, casteism, everything is still going on because of the transcendental signifieds are still holding power, visibly or invisibly. We did have untouchability as practice in our society. And we thought that with independence, declaration of independence and bringing of more education will have a change for the situation. Will bring a change. Did it bring? It is becoming even more worse. The condition is becoming more worse. You just go and read the newspapers. Watch the news. You will see. We are going back to centuries. We are going back to the remote time periods of casteism, or racial discrimination. All those we are still holding, sticking on to. From where do all this come? From the very point of sticking on to these power structures, the transcendental signifies. Not just in the sense of the examples I gave you. Many points, even in the families, you can see the transcendental signifier. That's why you talk about patriarchy. father-centered society where women are good for nothing sometimes. In families are there even with the women who cannot speak out, they cannot raise their voice, they cannot go for getting educated. With the marriage, you stopping education. Even after having maximum qualification, women are not let to go out for professional life. How does it happen? Again, another kind of power structure is working out there. Patriarchy, the transcendental signifies of patriarchal roles. That's still there. You cannot say that, yeah, we are progressing, we are getting more education, we are top number one in education. Even Kerala system is even far better. Nowadays, in the case of education and all, we are becoming far better. But the situation is not the same everywhere in India or in different corners of the world. Okay, so this is the way transcendental signified gets referenced there, and we will talk about this incredulity towards meta narratives at a point where we talk about postmodernism, the next topic of our paper, second module. Oh no, yeah, second module, second topic. He expands this further and reiterates that beyond and behind what one believes can be circumscribed as Rousseau's text, that there has never been anything but writing. But opens meaning and language is writing as the disappearance of natural presence. There has never been anything but writing. What opens meaning and language is writing as the disappearance of natural presence. We talk about writing. After writing, it is our provision to think and come up with our interpretations. You will not find these passages of Derrida by any means easy, but they will repay some intensive work. I told you, brain work is very important if you have to be a deconstructive critic. Ideally, in group discussion, do they enable you to pin down precisely what Derrida is saying about the relationship between word and world? Word and world. Only something as given at surface level by word determining world. Is it so? Is it what structuralism says? Language constitutes the reality. But there is every time there is something more and far beyond the word that a world can hold. World in the sense people, life, living style, thinking style. Everything can be entirely different from just what some words mean or talk about at surface level. And are his views as stark and uncompromising as they are often accused of being? So we have to think about Derridian viewpoints. Is this deconstruction really necessary or not? See, this is the whole part I read today. I explained again actually that class we dealt it, but still the whole part we dealt again as a revision. So stop and think it is. It is under the title Stop and Think. And this is the question asked here. That is, are all his views as stark and uncompromising as they are often accused of being? See, Derrida didn't get any easy acceptance, especially in the beginning. He had to, his theories, his concepts, propositions, everything had to face a lot of challenges because it is opposing everything established, everything, anything and everything established. See, religions will not promote because transcendental signified godly concept is going to be challenged. Politicians will not accept because their ultimate power structures are going to be challenged. Colonial masters will not accept. If Derrida or any post-structuralist critics have to present their essays, present their ideas in academic and intellectual discussion sectors, because it's very challenging. Your ideas, the already established systems are going to be challenged by these people. It's very tough a theory. It's very challenging a theory movement because it's not that naive, innocent. It's going to challenge the system. However, and it's very courageous, it's audacious. Don't we need it? That's the question. That's why the title is given like Stop and Think. You have to see if his views are stark and uncompromising as they are often accused of being. And the next title is Structuralism and Poststructuralism, some practical differences. This is going to be actually the final theoretical discussion part. Structuralism and Poststructuralism, some practical differences. After that, we will come across a title what post-structuralist critics do. That is again five points which I gave you in third semester itself as part of our learning post-structuralism and deconstruction as literary terms. I made use of this part itself because it's very authentic too. Note down those points at that level itself. And then last part will be deconstruction and example. We will do the practical deconstruction of two of the poems. Okay, and with that we will close the discussion on deconstruction and the post-structuralism and deconstruction. So here, that is what you mean by stop and think, and next class we will talk about this post-structuralism and deconstruction, some practical differences. That is from page number 68 to 70 of the printed text, the third edition of Peter Barry. Okay, so further editions come with but still we can stick on to this edition because the soft copy also is available here. Thank you so much for listening. Okay.